Good out to you, Saints fans. Welcome back to the channel where today we're going to talk about some more Saints news because even though we talked 2 days ago, there's already been changes to the coaching staff. In fact, we talked about what could Kubiak and what could Dennis Allen be doing to add to this offensive system because it has completely changed. Personally, I think that's a good thing. Now, I won't argue the fact that most of us would agree, yes, because I know there was a comment last time, so I kind of want to address this in the beginning. Agree. A lot of us would rather have a head coaching change, but that's not happening. So what we can say is that a dramatic shift in how they are approaching the offense is happening. It is going to be very different staff-wise, and we'll see how that ends up translating. The latest addition to the New Orleans Saints offensive coaching staff we'll talk about in a little bit is Rick Dennison, as well as a couple other things like the New Orleans Saints moving training camp, which personally I hate, but we'll get y'all's opinions as well. So here's what we're going to do. Shout out to those who are here early on. Good to see the folks from the Discord. No, Trey Nelson's here. Mr. Jerry. Mr. Jerry, for those that don't know, probably follows every Saints podcast in the world. He probably could name them. I think Mr. Jerry could name every New Orleans Saints podcast that exists right now. And that's impressive. That man is probably the most supportive of Who Dat National podcast of anybody. So shout out to Mr. Jerry. 007, he's the biggest troll. Love you, buddy. How you doing? Mark, good to see you. Eric Howard. Look, if you can't come to this podcast and have a little bit of fun, well, I don't know how you're gonna make it through the off season because we got many months before we see everybody back in uniform. The good news is Pelicans 11 games over 500 going into the All-Star break. That's really cool. Hoping they can keep that moving in the second half, and also hoping that the man, the myth, the legend, Zion Williamson can continue to make me look like an idiot for having the opinion they should move on from him. So, yeah, maybe that's the thing. Zion, over the past 5 games, has had like, what, 230-plus games. So this most recent one against the Wizards was nice. That was a fun one. If y'all didn't see it on Valentine's Day, 133 to 126. It was very nice. And he's officially played his second most games in his career. I still think that this year he's not playing at the level that I see when you get the hyped up MVP, but he's certainly looked good the past, month or so, especially since I ran my mouth. So I'm going to go ahead and admit that and acknowledge that so people don't think I'm hiding from the truth. So go ahead and admit it right there up in front of you. But let's talk about New Orleans Saints news. The Saints are going to be moving training camp to California. That is on the docket. I am not happy about that personally. I think the New Orleans Saints should keep it in Metairie. But here we are. That's how things are. So due to ongoing renovations to the practice facility, Saints are likely to head out west for this summer into the Orange County area. In that same place that we've seen them go out and practice before. And thankfully, at least hopefully, this is due to the upgrades and the renovations happening at the facility during this process. So we'll see, hopefully this isn't a forever thing. Hopefully it's just a short-term, quick thing. But New Orleans Saints will have practices over in California, which makes it more difficult obviously for the average fan to go out and see them. Now, we have Saints fans out in California, which I think is great. One thing I love about the New Orleans Saints is very similar to the Chicago Cubs, who I also follow if you're a baseball fan, is that they have fans all over the place. So if they end up having California as their training camp destination, you're going to have people there represented. So I think that's really neat. And it's going to be at the University of California in Irvine in Los Angeles. So if that happens, now giving you your forewarning here in February. That way, if you need to make plans, et cetera, you can make those plans. You can get everybody ready, get the whole family, convince the family that they need to go. Can you do that? Can y'all? I doubt it. I bet most of y'all's wives that if they manage to hear that, we're like, absolutely not. But it's California. So maybe some of y'all can do some convincing. I don't know. I'm just trying to help you out. Now, as far as what I think this will do for the team, this is something that I'm going to say that has zero analytical, scientific, film study, etc. backing. I personally believe a good team, a harder team, practices in hard conditions. Now, I will go ahead and say that that's probably dumb because the Buffalo Bills aren't winning a Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs just did. Kansas City, not exactly known for its torrent downpours and humidity in the middle of practice, as it can be in Louisiana. That said, like the old school football guy in me says they should absolutely be playing, abso-freaking-lutely be playing their practices in the heat, 2-a-days, bleeding to death, sweating to death, having to have IVs while they're running the football. But that's just the old school in me. Again, there's nothing about that has any type of backing. That's just me saying I think that they should practice in the heat down here with the rest of us. That's just me. Trey says, you called it when I asked you, see who's coming close, who you want as OC. Clint was one of the few names. Yeah, Clint was my number one name, Trey. And appreciate you recognizing it. Thank you for supporting the channel. But now I won't be able to see Clint Kubiak. Clint Kubiak and company. Earliest you really get to see him, they're going to be out in California. So I'm curious to see when the preseason rolls around, you know, if they've got all that fixed. Hopefully, obviously, it would be fixed and renovated rather, instead of wording it as if everything's broken down, but finish the renovations so we can see our team as quickly as possible. Because I know the fan base here in New Orleans, the fan base of this team is passionate about them. And it's one of the few teams that win, lose, draw, and draws never happen. But you see Saints fans coming out to support the Saints. So that's a big one. Now, the other big piece of news today, Money says they like the California move. Dope. I like it. The other piece of news today is bring in Rick Dennison as run game coordinator. Now, it should be noted that a big thing about Rick Dennison is he's an older, very seasoned, former NFL player, but he also was a coach. Now, he's been an offensive coordinator. He's actually interviewed to be a head coach. He's been several things. But what he's particularly known for, especially recently, is offensive line development. Now, how much does he work? Well, he's the Denver Broncos offensive line coach. Back in 2009, he was the offensive line coach and run game coordinator most recently for the Minnesota Vikings between 2019 and 2021, as well was the Jets, same position back in 2018 while being an OC in years prior. He was a very seasoned guy. Now, on one flip side of that, season doesn't necessarily mean good. Do want to reference everybody to Doug Marrone, who I was not really happy with how Doug Marrone handled the New Orleans Saints offensive line. Just felt like they got worse, not better. That was a problem. That said, I do want to say that I think that based on what people are saying about this individual, because I don't have a ton of familiarity with Rick Dennison because I don't cover the Jets, I don't cover the Broncos, nor do I cover the Minnesota Vikings. We can say that we know what the Minnesota Vikings were in those 3-year spans, right? So let's talk about offensive line development. If that truly is something that he's good at, New Orleans needs it, no questions asked, right? But let's talk about some numbers because we do try to provide analytics to everything that we do. So let's go back to 2019, which is the first year that he took over for that offensive line. So obviously the run game coordinator, he's been mostly focused on the running side of things. So let's talk about yards per carry, yards before contact, etc. So Alexander Mattison, for example, Dalvin Cook was a Pro Bowler in 2019. That's definitely worth pointing out. Dalvin Cook's a Pro Bowler, but Alexander Mattison, the backup running back, was averaging 2.7 yards before contact. That implies a really, really good team in terms of, or a really good run game in terms of blocking. Now, Dalvin Cook reached his first Pro Bowl under Rick Dennison in 2019. In 2020, he won another one. And then 2021, he was a Pro Bowler. The first 3 years of Dalvin Cook being a Pro Bowler came under Rick Dennison. His first 1,000-yard season came under Rick Dennison. Now, should be fair to note that there were other reasons why that happened. If you remember, in 2018, that's when Latavius Murray was still with the Vikings and was still their, kind of starter, right? So you had Latavius Murray there. He had like 6 TDs, almost 600 yards, and it was a split backfield. Then Dalvin Cook comes in, 1,000 yards. First year with Rick Dennison, he does 1,100, then 1,500, then 1,100. So you did start to see that translate, at least, those 3 years. Obviously, we're just taking initial variables. That seems to be good, right? Now, we know that this also means there's a connection to Clint Kubiak because Clint Kubiak and his dad, Gary Kubiak, obviously worked with Rick Dennison. So there's a familiarity there between the Kubiak, which is what you expect for Kubiak to start bringing in his guys. And then you have familiarity with just around the league. And I would say that there is recent success that you can point to say, hey, that's a good player, right? recent success for you to say this guy has, a history recently of doing something at this position that is successful. Whereas Doug Marrone, when he came in, I don't know if we could say the same thing for Doug Marrone. So Doug Marrone was the offensive line coach for New Orleans here for the past couple of years. Before that, he was with Alabama, and people talked about him actually being a negative at Alabama. And then the last time he was an offensive line coach before that, you had to go all the way back to 2002 to 2005 with the New York Jets. So he basically went almost 15 years before predominantly coaching offensive line again as the predominant coach, because keep in mind with Jacksonville, he was the assistant head coach and the offensive line coach 2015, which I guess if you want to run that in there, you can, before he became the interim head coach and the full-time head coach. And you just didn't feel like the past two spots he's had as an offensive line coach that you saw a lot of success. A lot of people at Alabama didn't like him. He ended up leaving after 1 year. And then most Saints fans are going to say that the New Orleans Saints offensive line probably regressed the past 2 seasons. So you've seen an upward trend, or at least some good things on the resume for the hiring here with Rick Dennison. And maybe you didn't see that same thing with Doug Marrone. So, yeah. Yeah. Fiery says Dennison's worked with Clint before as well as his dad, Gary. That's correct. Jerry says if the Saints do go to California for the training camp later this year, you're okay with that? That's awesome. And Lester, who dat? Good to see you. Good to see you. Sorry, I had to respond to kids acting like crazy. They're just crazy. Y'all have 3 kids? I do. So, as we get and look at what Dennison can do, I think the number one thing is who are going to be the offensive linemen that he's working with. Obviously, you got Cesar Ruiz, Eric McCoy. Can he be the guy that helps turn Trevor Penning into something? Can he develop Trevor Penning into a quality starter, which is just not what you've managed to see from him so far? And, yeah, I mean, personally, I like the signing. Is it something that I'm like super excited about? I don't know if I as super excited as the word, but I will say that it makes sense. And we're already starting to see this kind of, formulate into the group that we're expecting. So if you're New Orleans, I think this is a good thing. You got your offensive coordinator. The run game is something that we need this team to work with. We need this team to have, that same level of success from running the ball that we saw before. Obviously, there's been an issue here in recent years, and I don't think it's been because of a lack of talent on the offensive side of the ball. No offense, obviously, meant to, the current offensive lineman who we'll still have, but I don't believe that Alvin Kamara is a subpar running back. But if you just went only by yards per carry as a statistic, you would think that. You would think he's a subpar running back because 3.9 is not going to win you many awards. However, I don't think that's the case because he's still dominant in the receiving game the past 2 years. For example, 2022, he averaged 8.6 yards per reception. Over the past 2 years, he has 40 first downs. 40 through receiving. In 2021, he had 20. So, I mean, the receiving game has stayed basically the same, not counting when Drew Brees left because his receiving numbers did significantly drop off after losing Drew Brees, but that's kind of to be expected. Not to mention he's also played less games. This past year, he only played 13 games, dealt with that suspension, obviously, whereas like his rookie year, he played 16. So the passing game was still there, but the running game started to fall back a little bit. So I think that that's part of the conversation because I also look at it and I go, I really like Kendre Miller as a young running back. Obviously, we only got to see him really kind of in one game, but I still like Kendre Miller. I thought Jamal Williams was never really used correctly, and I don't feel like the offensive line was really set up to provide for him. The only running back you could say ran well, not a running back, it's Taysom Hill. Everybody else just kind of never really found a consistent rhythm until that final game of the year where Kendre Miller kind of went off. And I really hope that Kendre Miller game is his coming out party, if you will, because obviously he dealt with injuries most of the year, but he had 73 yards on 13 carries and a tutty in the last game of the season, and I thought he looked really good. Hopefully that is an indicator of success to come. But I think if you're New Orleans, this is the type of signing that you wanted to have. I think this is good. I'm happy with it, right? So adding Rick Dennison now leaves only a couple more holes for the New Orleans Saints coaching staff to fill. You have now gotten your running back game coordinator and your offensive line coach. Still got to get your running back coach. Still got to get your wide receivers coach and your quarterbacks coach. But you're making progress, right? And I'm also very curious how will Dennison work with Jari Evans? Now, I say that because I want Jari Evans on the roster. And I will admit right now to everybody watching live, that is a bias to me just being a longtime Saints guy. I want him on the roster. So you got Clancy Barone, who's basically the only person that led a position that is staying. So Clancy Barone is the tight ends coach. He's staying on, and they're not replacing him. But you got Clint Kubiak, you have Clancy Barone, and now you're adding in Dennison to be a positional head coach. So I'm curious how this works with Jari Evans. You know, I think that that's great. I think that Jari Evans is, to me, one of the best names you can have if you want to move forward with a guy who, in my opinion, knows the game, right? I mean, obviously playing in the NFL does not guarantee you become a very good coach in any facet, but I mean, Jari Evans has a legitimate Hall of Fame resume. I mean, he's a Ring of Honor player for the New Orleans Saints no matter what, but he's a legitimate Hall of Fame, style type guy. I mean, the dude's a 4-time first-team All-Pro. He also made an All-Pro a 5th time with the second team. I mean, he's a 6-time Pro Bowler, won the Super Bowl. He's part of the Hall of Fame's All-2010s team. Like, Jari Evans is a really good player. Now, he only played 12 years, and you do see a lot of, really well-known offensive linemen playing longer. But, man, had a 12-year career, played 180-plus games, and made five in a row All-Pro teams and 6 in a row Pro Bowls. You would think that on the right situation and circumstance that he can become a very effective tutor to these younger offensive line guys. And I'm very curious how that works with Rick Dennison and how much he allows that, leans on that, etc. With Dennison being an older guy, and obviously they want Jari Evans to be kind of like that up-and-coming coach in the offensive line. They've let him work with the team for 2 years now, and they made it very clear that he wasn't leaving here recently. So, when they got rid of Marone, it wasn't Jari Evans, the assistant offensive line coach, is gone as well. They're letting him stick around because they want to have his impact on the team. And I think that's great. I don't think it's just a matter of giving him a ring either. I don't think that's all it is. I don't think it's just hey, you're keeping that Super Bowl ring around to show to everybody. So I'm very curious to see what happens. And maybe he becomes just like Zach Strief. And I know the Sean Payton connection. That's what people are going to comment about. But Zach Strief is the offensive line coach for the Denver Broncos, right? And he was an offensive line assistant here. Obviously, he went to go join Sean Payton last year as our offensive line coach. And sure, a little bit of that is Sean Payton keeping his guys. But at the same time, I think that you can have a similar path for Jari Evans, and there's nothing to knock that with, right? That's fine. That's completely okay. So here we are. Chill out. Be excited, but at the same time, temper it a little bit. I really am curious to see where things continue to go because I think they're moving in the right direction. Just like last offseason, I said the Saints did everything they needed to do in the 2023 offseason to address everything that they needed to address. I think they did that. I not necessarily did it in the way that everyone was who I wanted and it was perfect. I'm not arguing that, but I do think that they did it well, as in attacking every position of need in one form or fashion, and in some ways hitting it in multiple angles, which is what you should do. And so far, they seem to be doing the same thing with the coaching staff. We were worried that they were going to play it too slow, not get their guy, but they did get their guy. They got the guy from the Super Bowl roster, right? And now they're building around that. So far, so good. It's okay to be a little bit excited. Just keep it too calm. Don't get too crazy. Let's not start February talking about how this offense is going to lead this team to being 13-4. Let's temper that a little bit, but I really, really am excited. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, Quentin says they already have the QB coach. Was a signing made that I have missed? Because if a signing was made that I have missed, I will gladly correct myself here on stream. But at the moment, I'm pretty sure they don't have one. I will verify that again real quick. But at the moment, they don't have a quarterback coach unless one got brought in today and I missed it, which is possible. It is absolutely possible. But I know Rick Dennison is the one coming through. I know Matthew Perez talked about that. He is with the Times-Picayune, but I don't believe there's anybody else that the New Orleans Saints have brought in. Now, you could be thinking about Ronald Curry, which is who they did have. Now, Ronald Curry has chosen to take a position with Buffalo. Andrew Yannick, I actually don't know this one. So we're going to have me doing a quick ad lib live on the channel because I missed this one. So shockingly, we have another tie to the Kubiak tree. So most recently is that he has actually been brought in as the quarterback's coach for New Orleans Saints. Thank you very much. I have missed this. Was with the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings before that. And there's your connection to Clint Kubiak, the Minnesota Vikings, where he was actually with the Vikings between 2015 through 2021 as an offensive assistant, offensive line coach, wide receivers coach, and then finally quarterbacks coach. So appreciate chat for correcting me on that one. I missed it. So I don't know really anything about Andrew. I will say that on paper, you see the Chicago Bears, you immediately think Justin Fields, but I will also add this real quick. There's a lot of things wrong in Chicago, and I don't know if it was the quarterback coach that was the main thing being wrong in Chicago. But there's another connection. So that's actually two filled in then. I was unaware of the quarterback coach one, so there you go. We now have the quarterback's coach, we have the tight ends coach, we have the offensive line coach / running game coordinator, and the offensive coordinator. New Orleans Saints staff is coming together. So now we're only missing the wide receivers coach and the running backs coach. But yeah, having that experience means that he's worked with Dennison, he's worked with Kubiak, and this is, normal, right? You hire guys that you're familiar with and that you believe can do the job very well. And that's exactly where Andrew is going to fall into, is, right in there with everybody else. I will say that if you are one of those individuals who prefers a younger head coach, believes in younger ideas, he's 35 years old, which is like 2 years older than Derek Carr. He is a younger guy. So this is somebody who's coming in and working his way up. So whereas Rick Dennison is an older fella, he's 65. You've got a younger Andrew at 35, maybe has some prolific ideas. I will admit I have to do some research on him. I don't really know much about him. So I will do that. Maybe we'll go over that this weekend. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the Discord. If y'all aren't in the Discord, feel free to join. And then we can talk about that next week when we get a little bit more data on it. Because I don't like to speak on things I don't know or haven't taken a look at. It's okay to have an opinion, but generally it's best to have some level of informed opinion. So per Derek Underhill, they brought in Derek Foster from the Chargers. Good note, Quinn. You can tell that I'm out of the loop, apparently. Let me look up Derek Foster and see if he is. So a big thing is that they don't have any of these guys listed on the New Orleans Saints website. They don't have any of these on the New Orleans Saints website. Oh, the Derek Foster one. Okay, that one I knew and I forgot because I remember they brought him in and my first thought was he worked with Eckler. And I thought that I think that's a pretty good thing to have on your resume is working with Eckler. So, good one on that one. That one I just forgot. I did not know about Andrew. I legitimately forgot. Did we talk about Derek Foster in the last episode? So, that one I am familiar with because I went and watched a little bit of the Chargers after they announced that. And I'm like, okay, let me see what they do with their running style and everything and how well that's going to fit. But obviously, when you got Austin Eckler having two fantastic seasons, in my opinion, I still am not a fan of pay the running back. I know they're going to hate me, but Austin Eckler has had two fantastic seasons. He led the league in in total touchdowns, rushing and receiving 2 years in a row. And that's the guy that they just brought in. So that's a pretty neat hire as well. So that means the wide receivers coach. And I swear, if y'all have the wide receivers coach and y'all pull it out your butts, I'm going to be so mad. I'll be so mad. Wow. I can't believe that. I'll have to text Nick and talk about that. So, wow. That's on me. That's on me. All right. So, better than last year. I am excited. So, yeah, this stream has turned into more than I thought it would. And this is actually one of the drawbacks to having a live podcast is sometimes when you don't have all your notes here and ready, you look silly. So, it's okay. It's all good. This is also part of the fun of working together. Because I also know that they were interviewing Keith Williams, which we hadn't got to yet. He's actually on your screen if y'all are watching on YouTube. So I was trying to build up to that. But they are interviewing Keith Williams to be the wide receiver coach. No signing has been made official, but they were interviewing him. He was the assistant wide receivers coach for 3 seasons with the Baltimore Ravens, and he was the Tulane wide receiver coach all the way back in 2014, I think. So if y'all haven't seen that one, that's one to keep an eye on who could end up being the spot. And The big thing is they talk about how much he's been integral to the development of Zay Flowers. So if he comes in, that gives you the full offensive coaching staff. The only one I'm curious about here, and I'd actually have to look this part up, is does he have any direct ties to Clint Kubiak, or are they simply going out and getting a guy that they believe is the best guy for the job? So let's go take a look down memory lane here and see Keith Williams. We're going to check his full coaching history. Let's check Keith Williams' full coaching history and see if he's got any direct ties to Kubiak. I'm very, very curious. So we've got, wow, there's a lot of people in football. Let's see. Okay, that's not who I'm looking. I doubt that's Keith Williams is too common of a name. Okay, so Keith Williams, we're going to go to the Baltimore Ravens page and pull it up this way. So with the Ravens, 2021, 2022, it was with Nebraska, and with the AAF in 2019. Fresno State, San Jose, and he was a pro player with Washington in 1994, played for the Frankfurt Galaxy in 95, the Rough Riders in the CFL in 95 through 96. Now, nope, can't be that. So, yeah, I see no direct ties to Kubiak in any way, shape, or form. I see no direct ties. So that means that they're just literally going out trying to find who they believe could be the best player or best coach for the New Orleans Saints. And I think that's a great move. Now, I have nothing wrong with hiring your guys, but if you don't have a guy that you're super confident in, hire somebody that you believe is one of the best of the positions. And with him being an assistant wide receivers coach, this would be a upward progression for him. And I would say that I'd be okay with that move. Cody Burns coming out of college, I had no issue with it. I don't think it necessarily worked out as well as we wanted it to. So now this gives you an opportunity to try something else. So what is Cody Burns up to now? Cody Burns is currently still has not found another role. Cody Burns has not found another role as of yet. I'm curious where he ends up going. But he was 2 years here, obviously, with the New Orleans Saints as wide receiver coach. But not sure where he's going to end up at. But he has not been picked up yet. But that was his, obviously, most recent path. Paul says, I was one of the Saints fans who thought that they would run it back, the offense. I was wrong. It's okay, Paul. We all have those same things. And I think you were justified in having that concern, right? Because that's basically what they did with Dennis Allen. They just ran it back with something they knew and were comfortable with. And I'm not trying to throw shade at Dennis Allen, but we knew that he wasn't my first pick when we talked about it. And I didn't think he was necessarily a bad pick, but he wasn't my first choice. And it felt like New Orleans played it safe. Well, it feels like they're doing the opposite. So if you have issues with, for example, the man, the myth, the potential New Orleans legend, Mickey Loomis, I can understand it. But I'll say this, they seem to be doing everything that they should do. It's almost one of those where you're questioning it, like, what are you missing? Because this truly isn't what you're used to seeing the New Orleans Saints do. This is an entire overhaul of the offense to take advantage of playmakers they have now, and they're all getting guys that fit. Like Kubiak obviously comes from his dad, Gary, and the Shanahan system. West Coast styles that perfectly fit Alvin Kamara, perfectly fit Kendre Miller, perfectly fit Chris Olave, perfectly fit tight ends who will attack the seams. I mean, it all works. Like, it makes sense. I completely understand being bewildered that the New Orleans Saints are actually doing these type of moves. Now, this doesn't guarantee that it's successful, but it's certainly everything that I wanted them to do and didn't believe they would. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So moving forward, hopefully this is going to translate into a better offensive performance. Now, I do still anticipate, I would actually be shocked, but I do still anticipate there being a little bit of a growing pain, right? New offensive coach, new coordination, all this other stuff. You're probably going to see them not start off super fast at the beginning of the season, not coming out the league's best team. We could be wrong, and I would love for them to do that. I would. Don't think it's necessarily realistic, but it could absolutely happen. In fact, give you an example of a team here in recent memory. Take a look at the Houston Texans. right? The Houston Texans took a few games to kind of get going and get a level of consistency when it came to points scored. Now, they had a tough opening game with Baltimore, but their third and fourth games of the season, they scored more than 30 points, right? And then they had two straight 30-point games against the Buccaneers and against the Bengals. They actually had a streak of 6 games where they scored, I think, like 24 or more points. And I would say talent for talent. Rookie quarterback and then patchwork offensive line, a great left tackle, superior left tackle to what New Orleans has. The offense did pretty well, right? I think the offense was pretty solid for them. I mean, statistically, it was the 13th best team in scoring. And I know that immediately is going to bring in the argument of the Saints were the 9th best. Well, the Saints weren't the 9th best until the last game of the season, but still, I think the Saints have talent on their roster, and it certainly started to work towards the end of the season. Now, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but I do believe that this team got much better as a unit as the season went on. So hopefully somebody comes in, like Clint Kubiak, takes that momentum, builds around it, and pushes them forward. Let's just, outside of the offensive lineman, what other needs do we have to address on offense? Well, I still think that, and please be clear that I'm not taking a shot at A.T. Perry with this. Wide receiver is absolutely a target. Here's why. I like A.T. Perry. I like A.T. Perry a lot. I think under the right tutelage, A.T. Perry can become and be groomed into a full-time starter in this league. However, you do not bank a starting split end on a guy who caught 200 yards last year. You do not do that. That is bad football, bad management. And none of this is an indictment of me not believing in A.T. Perry. None of it. Because I actually am really excited about A.T. Perry. But you would be an absolute fool to take A.T. Perry's limited run and go, we're going to ignore the position because we got A.T. Perry. You definitely bring somebody in. Now, you still want A.T. Perry to be the guy and to continue to grow and be better. Absolutely. Just like Rashid Shaheed has developed and gotten better and better. And Rashid Shaheed, in my opinion, is one of the best slot guys, especially as a deep threat in the NFL. His first year, a little under 500 yards. His past year, a little over 700 yards. He showed improvement, doubled his touchdown numbers, made an all-pro for special teams, but still, you don't bank on A.T. Perry going from 240 yards to 1,000 yards at split ends. So you definitely need to address that. And then the not-so-fat elephant in the room, quarterback, right? You've got Derek Carr for at least this next year. I think Derek Carr is probably your bridge for maybe 3 total years. But you've got to find the quarterback of the future. And you'll never, any of y'all who are younger than the age of 30, you're going to hear older people like me and your parents gripe about how Sean Payton let the Kansas City Chiefs jump ahead of them to take Patrick Mahomes because the Chiefs knew the Saints were going to take Patrick Mahomes. If you really believed in Patrick Mahomes, you should have gone and freaking taken Patrick Mahomes, jump up to 9, jump up to 8, do whatever, take him, and they didn't. And Patrick Mahomes just won his 3rd Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes in his first 7 seasons is better statistically than Brady's first 7 seasons in literally every category, and he won 3 Super Bowls. You'll never hear us stop complaining about how we let the Kansas City Chiefs jump us to take a true, dynamic, world-changing quarterback with a Hall of Fame head coach. Literally, Sean Payton would probably still be here, and there'd be another New Orleans Saints dynasty had they gotten Patrick Mahomes. You got to find that quarterback of the future. And if you're a Derek Carr fan out there, I'm so sorry. Derek Carr is very, 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 very unlikely to be that guy. Unlikely. Can Clint Kubiak come in and elevate Derek Carr's play? I do believe that is possible. Will Clint Kubiak turn him into Patrick Mahomes? No. And there is 0 chance of that happening. And if I have to read one more argument about how Derek Carr for the past decade has had to deal with all these hardships and new coaches and blah, blah, so does most quarterbacks in the NFL. Okay? He's just not elite. And that's okay because he can be really, really, really good. Matt Ryan was not elite and he won an MVP thanks to Kyle Shanahan. So I believe Clint Kubiak can definitely work well with Derek Carr. Hell, that's one of the main reasons I wanted Kubiak because he can come in and elevate Derek Carr. And his name's not Gruden. But you've got to find a quarterback, right? There's a difference between elite and good. Derek Carr can be very good with New Orleans. He absolutely can. But he'll never reach that elite. And you always want to find, if you can, that elite guy. Absolutely. You want to find that franchise quarterback. So I think that is a must-have. And then after that, offensive line. So, I mean, the offense definitely has things that you can address. 100%. So it's like we talked about from the scouting perspective. And I know I've shared these stories before. Some of y'all who've been here a long time get tired of hearing the same story. Some of y'all who are new haven't heard it. But one of the things they teach you in scouting when you're talking about these types of players, especially quarterbacks, there is the phrase a quarterback you can win with or a quarterback you can win because of. Patrick Mahomes is a quarterback you win because of. Derek Carr is a quarterback you win with. And that guy can still be very heckin' good. And I think Derek Carr can be very heckin' good. There's a reason that he's received MVP voting before. Like, he never won it, but he still received votes for it. It's going back all the way to 2016, but you know what I'm saying. Carr can still be a good quarterback with a great system here. But if you go and have an opportunity to find a stud, you go get the stud. It's the same thing with Alex Smith with the Chiefs. Alex Smith was very effective with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was arguably good. I would actually say very good with Kansas City. He was immediately replaced by an elite guy. Like, he was with Kansas City for what, 5 years? He made a Pro Bowl. He actually made 2 Pro Bowls with Kansas City. He got voting for a comeback player of the year. And he was never amazing. I would actually argue that Derek Carr is better, but whatever. I'm not trying to turn this into a how good is Derek Carr debate. But then you went and got that thoroughbred horse, right? You went and got Patrick Mahomes. And that's what you want to do here. You can win with Derek Carr, absolutely, but you go and find that thoroughbred. And if there's one that you believe in, grab them. And I am a firm believer, and I use players like Love up in Green Bay as an example. If you can sit a quarterback for a year or two and train them and perfect their mechanics, man, they can come out of the gate really, really strong. Really strong. I think Jordan Love has. I think Jordan Love came out. I mean, because his first year as a starter, 32 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, threw for 64%. And obviously he's not a rookie because he sat 2 years behind A-Rod, but if you could have a first-year quarterback come in and give you 32 TDs and 11 interceptions, every single one in this chat would absolutely take it immediately. So even if you have to get a guy that sits behind Derek Carr, that's okay. Derek Carr's only thrown for 30 more touchdowns once, by the way. So you can do that. You absolutely do that. Considering how much of a bust he was in San Francisco, Alex Smith was decent. Alex Smith to me is such a great example because I try to really push this all the time. Like, there are players that are mid-tier players. And when you are mid-tier, what elevates you into being great or good? Well, what elevates you into being very good? Coaching. And so often I think we minimize or forget the impact of coaching in any professional sport because it's hard to quantify it, right? Like, how much of an impact does Rick Dennison actually have? You know, it's really difficult to quantify how good that person is, whereas we can tell how good a quarterback is. If a quarterback throws 40 touchdowns, guess what? He's good. If a quarterback throws 30 touchdowns, guess what? He's good. It's just, you can see it. There's a number there. It's verifiable. If a guy gets 13 sacks, he's good. But how do you know if the offensive line coach is good and the development guy is good, right? That's something that we on the outside as fans, analysts, etc., can really not really know. So if you have the opportunity to take a guy that you can create into what you want to do, you do it. Eric says, do you think this new offensive staff can figure out what to do with Rashid, Shaheed, and Taysom Hill? My answer to that, Eric Howard, would be, did the San Francisco 49ers do unique, fun things with Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey? You know, those guys, did it work out pretty well? Absolutely yes. Can they? Absolutely yes. Now, I am not trying to pretend that Clint Kubiak is going to come in and immediately be Kyle Shanahan. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that you should see a lot more of, to use Pete Carmichael's words, window dressing the New Orleans Saints offense this year. By the way, congratulations to Pete Carmichael, who's officially joined the Denver Broncos staff as an offensive assistant. I mean, Curtis Samuel? Yeah, Curtis Samuel. That guy. Oh, I love this channel, and I love our community. Bunch of goofballs. Yeah, bunch of goofballs. Oh, man, why do I put up with y'all? Because I love you. That's why. I know the offensive line is important. You need to go far, but really on the quarterback to elevate the team. A great offensive line will take you further than a good quarterback will. Now, keep in mind what I just said. I did not say an elite quarterback. I said a good quarterback. A good offensive line will take you further than a great offensive line will take you further than a good quarterback will. I'm making sure I say the same phrase twice. Saints have got to rebuild the offensive line. Derek Carr is not good enough to operate behind a mid offensive line. He's just not. You got to be really special to do that. They absolutely need to focus on that. But I'm telling you, if you're picking at 14 and you have fallen in love with a quarterback, I know Gundam's going to be screaming Jaden Daniels for the next 2 months. If they love Jaden Daniels, fine. Go get him. Go get him. If you have a guy, just only thing I've ever said about quarterback drafting, don't draft a guy for the sake of drafting him. Like, don't draft a quarterback because you need a quarterback. That's the dumbest thing you can do. Do not just go draft a guy for the sake of drafting him. If you do that, well, you're an idiot. Sorry, I'm not trying to be a jerk. That's stupid. You don't just draft a guy because not every guy fits. And, contrary to popular belief, you actually do want to draft around what works for you and your team. But you can go do mock draft simulators all day long, and you're going to see quarterbacks who are available. Maybe you like Bo Nix. He's probably going to be there in that, 8 to 14 bubble. Right? Caleb Williams is probably going to go immediately. Drake May, we'll see where he goes. Jaden Daniels, you're probably going to have 3 quarterbacks go in the top 10. But after that, very much could go any direction. Any direction. So it just depends on if you're in love with somebody. Personally, I think the New Orleans Saints are in a great position to get a great edge rusher and a great offensive tackle in rounds 1 and rounds 2. That's what I personally think that they would be in a good position to do. Take them both of those things because that's what they need. They need offensive and defensive line really, really badly. Now, if you have a quarterback that you love and you scouted well and he's starting to fall, think about it. Go, okay, maybe we do this. Maybe we do this. But generally speaking, take the best player available. That's what good teams do. So, TJ says, saw a mock from Daniel Jeremiah that has the New Orleans Saints taking Bo Nix. Gumbo Bo. Yeah, Gumbo. I see it. I respect it. Not saying I would do it, but I respect the play on words. I love that. Does Jaden Daniels fit the San Francisco system, or does it matter? Jaden Daniels does not fit a West Coast system. That does not mean that Jaden Daniels couldn't work in it. Let me be very clear because I don't want anybody saying I'm a Jaden Daniels detractor. Jaden Daniels coming out of LSU right now does not slide into a West Coast offense and play well. There are stark differences between CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels. That is not me saying that Stroud is better than Daniels or vice versa, but that they are very different style of quarterbacks coming out of college. And that doesn't mean that Jaden Daniels could not become the quarterback that fits perfectly in a system like Clint Kubiak, Shanahan, etc. Absolutely could, but it would need time. Okay? There are some things that Jaden Daniels does not do near as well as CJ Stroud did, which are a must-have for a West Coast quarterback. For example, CJ Stroud coming out of college processed the middle of the field pretty quickly and was accurate in the intermediate parts of the field. Jaden Daniels does not process the middle of the field as fast. I'm not saying he's bad, but Jaden Daniels can be an electrifying guy who gets the yards in any way he needs to. There's actually a pretty cool quote by Tom Brady recently, and I think that there are multiple schools of thought on quarterbacking that are all right, but he talked about how you'll see a quarterback run 20 yards, and I don't think he was trying to shame Lamar Jackson with this, but somebody had put up a Lamar Jackson highlight while Brady was talking, and Brady broke down like how that play should have never happened because the quarterback should be able to recognize the coverage said that what they had called was impossible, and he should have checked out of it. Instead, he turned into a 20-yard run. So Brady's saying like, hey, in my mind, I'm just looking at this going like, why does that run even need to happen when I can just go to another play and get 15 yards through the air as I'm supposed to instead of, running around the field for 30 yards to gain 9. It's all about how the system works for the player and how the player fits in the system. New Orleans had and still will have a system that does not cater to that type of player. That doesn't mean that Jaden Daniels isn't smart enough to become that type of player, because I know for a long time, Russell Wilson had this moniker that people threw on him that he was a running quarterback. No, Russell Wilson ran because he had to. Russell Wilson was always a guy that preferred to be in the pocket, attack the field, and go through his reads. And Jaden Daniels can be the same way. But I do think that Jaden Daniels has to improve on a lot of things before he could slide into a West Coast offense and be an elite dominator in it. Just like Patrick Mahomes dominates in that West Coast version that Andy Reid runs. Jaden Daniels, I hate to draw the comparisons because I'm not just trying to say he's limited because the dude just won 2 MVPs, but look at what they do with Lamar Jackson. Right? Look at what they do with Lamar Jackson. Now, I'll be very clear. I am in no way shaming Lamar. The dude now has won 2 MVPs. He's clearly very good, but you have a different system of how that guy fits. Because I'll tell you right now, if you put Lamar into Andy Reid's West Coast today, he is not an MVP. He will have to adjust to that. He's an MVP now. Twice. I will admit I wouldn't have voted for him if I was voting for an MVP this year. I do think that he deserved to be the MVP in 2019. I don't like I wouldn't have given it to him this year of all years, but still, point being, where you fit. It's where you fit. Eugene says, greetings from fabulous Philadelphia. Not nearly as hard being a Houdat here these days. Yes, you're petty. I love that, Eugene. I love that about you. So, I love that about you. This year's MVP selection wasn't great. I'm curious who chat would have voted for MVP, but I wouldn't have given it to Lamar. I know why Lamar got it. They made the playoffs. Lamar made hard pushes. Lamar was good. And the truth is, when they pick MVP, they're definitely looking at guys who made it to the playoffs and were, it's not supposed to influence your decision, but playoffs definitely influence the decision. Like if I'm going by just how guys performed last year, there are a lot of guys I would have given it to first. And this is going to be, people are not going to like this. I would have given it to Dak Prescott before I gave it to Lamar Jackson. And y'all know how I feel about the Dallas Cowboys. I would have given it to Dak Prescott before I gave it to him. But that's just me. That's just me. I would have given it to Dak Prescott. But hard to give Dak Prescott when the Cowboys are literally notorious for good season performance and then immediately bombing in the playoffs. But I would have given it to Dak. I mean, if I had to choose a singular player, because I said this after the Super Bowl, TJ, you weren't here, but on Tuesday's episode, I said that if I could have voted for who the Super Bowl MVP was, I would have said the Super Bowl MVP was Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, you're not going to give it to the guy who loses, but if I had to pick the guy who gets it this year, I would have given it to Christian McCaffrey, like the MVP. Christian McCaffrey had 2,000 yards from scrimmage, 21 touchdowns. He was the offensive player of the year, all pro. I would have given it to Christian McCaffrey. Like everybody talks about, Brock Purdy. Christian McCaffrey is why that team made it so deep in the playoffs. So, anyway, all that said, you can absolutely have success with Jaden Daniels, but if you bring him to a team like here, you have to rework a lot of how he works, and that's okay, because I do think that he's intelligent and can do those things. I think that Jaden Daniels has the potential to be anything that he wants to be. But we've talked about before, situation matters. Situation matters. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey going 2,000 yards, total offense, 21 touchdowns. He should have been the MVP to me. He just should have. But who gives the MVP to running backs in the 21st century? Just don't do that. And again, I'm not trying to say Lamar's undeserving. I just don't think that Lamar deserved it this year. Like Lamar, the year that he did win it, absolutely deserved it. And I would argue that even the year after, like 2020, he might have deserved it then too. I just don't think this year's Lamar was MVP. So. But anyway, it's been a good conversation. Had a great time, but we're going to wrap up, everybody. Still not happy Jari Evans didn't get selected in the Hall of Fame? We'll get him there. We'll get him there. We'll absolutely get him there. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. We're going to be coming live again with you soon. We're going to have a mock draft next week. Get your mock drafts ready, ladies and gentlemen. Get your names ready of who your favorite is. We're going to start our prospects. Who dat? God bless. I love every single one of you. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Thank you again to those who support the channel through super chats and donating. I'm able to do what I do thanks to people like y'all. So thank you, Trey, who donated earlier. I really do greatly appreciate it. We'll catch y'all on the next Who Dat Confessional podcast. Deuces, that's me. See you then, and we outie.